Yeah, I was going to send it to you, but it's in his Twitter. So we have roughly 1 million mail-in ballots and roughly 5 million.
So when we get to the 30-second mark, our mics are probably going to mute. Welcome to Your Vote on Your TV Halton. I'm Melissa Candelaria and I will be your host for tonight's coverage. It's finally here. It's election night, but I'm not alone. Joining me are three amazing panelists who are going to give you all the details of what's happening tonight as results roll in. First of all, beside me we have Regional Councillor Milton, Zishan Hamid. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We've got Regional Councillor for Burlington, Lisa Kearns, and Regional Councillor for Oakville, Jeff Knoll. I want to really say our thanks and appreciate that you're here. All three of you have extensive political experience, and not only that, I had mentioned earlier to our news anchor when we were promoting tonight that you also have extensive experience in your own respective communities, so you really have a unique perspective for each and every one as we see the results roll in and we talk about the issues that matter to us. So I want to appreciate you for that, so thanks. So here, as we just wanted to let you know that as results roll in, we are going to have some information on your screen. So you're going to see the information of your specific candidates of each riding up on the bar to the side. That at the bottom is going to be party-wide, so as the numbers roll in. So there you go. There's the Oakville numbers as they roll in. That's what you're going to see. So when I want to refer to more detail as to how the numbers did specifically, you are going to go see a full screen of each of the candidates in the riding, and we'll show you an example of that in a moment. There you go. There's the Oakville riding there. So pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Now, to remind you that are watching, 338 seats. We need 170 for a majority. However, polls suggest, and maybe one of you can disagree with me or not, it doesn't look likely it's going to be a majority, but we shall see, shall we?
We shall.
Yeah.
We shall.
Yeah. What before we get into what our team is doing on the ground, I wanted to get a quick snapshot from each of you. What do you expect tonight? I'm going to talk to you first, Z. Go on.
I think it's hard to predict because of the voter turnout, but overall, if I were a betting man, I would bet on Liberal minority.
Okay, what about you?
I would put my money with Z, and I would go with a Liberal minority. I think there has been a very strong platform put forward by all the parties. We have had more choice in a federal election than I think we've ever had, but I think what it'll come down to is that voter faithfulness and you know what has been cut in by some of those minority parties looking to edge in on the more established center parties.
Jeff?
Well, I'm going to make it a sweep here. I do also believe it's going to be a minority Liberal government. You know, I think that unfortunately this election happened so rapidly, and I think some of the parties had a hard time getting enough the candidates that they wanted in the riding, so they ended up settling in many cases for candidates. But I do believe that there's going to be some significant upsets There'll be some significant Conservative takebacks. I think we may see some change in Halton region. I'm predicting at least one of the ridings for sure will go Conservative. We'll see how the evening plays out. But I think I think the Conservatives will come out stronger than the pollsters are showing. There's been a lot of shifting over the weekend. I spoke to one of my pollster friends just today, and the indication was that, in his words, it's at play. So there's a lot going on, and people, I think, were really reconsidering what they're doing on the weekend.
Well, before I ask you then maybe who your prediction was, we're going to go to Sherry in Oakville now to see what's going on there. Sherry?
Much like everywhere across Canada, COVID has made campaigning here in Oakville very hard. And perhaps no one knows how much time and effort went into protecting Canada and keeping Canadians safe over the last year and a half than current MP here in Oakville, Anita Anand. Anand, who is the first cabinet minister for Oakville in 3 decades, was appointed the Public Service and Procurement Minister in November of 2019. And then, of course, a world pandemic hit. And she was in charge of finding enough PPE, enough rapid tests, and of course, vaccinations for Canadians across the country, and obviously her constituents right here. Now, Oakville has predominantly been a Liberal constituency, except for a brief Tory stop in 2008 to 2015, but there's no reason to think that the status quo will change tonight. And then has the edge here in Oakville. She campaigned on things like affordable housing, pursuing more green contracts, addressing climate change, and protecting small business. However, on Sunday, the Conservative Party leader, Aaron O'Toole, was here in Oakville, and he was promoting for the last day, the final push, his person, Carrie Coburn. She is the Conservative candidate here. She, of course, is a small business owner, and he was here to help support her, give her that last push. So no one really knows what that did until these numbers start rolling in the next couple hours. And of course, if it is close, there were 5,000 special ballots, which includes the mail-in ballots, and they won't be counted until tomorrow. So if that number is close, about 5,000 ballots will be counted tomorrow. So I guess time will tell, and we'll see who wins in Oakville.
Thanks, Sherry. And certainly time will tell to see who will win in Oakville. And it was actually an interesting riding to boot, because we had both leaders of each of the parties, the Liberals and the Conservative, pay a visit in Oakville. And, there's been a lot of speculation as to why that is. And one of them is the fact that it's a lot tighter than we think. Let me go with you, Jeff. Was that the one we were talking about?
Yeah, I think Oakville of the Halton ridings is probably the most likely to switch. And I don't want to contradict the folks in the field, but Oakville actually is a traditional Conservative riding. Terrence Young and Otto Jelinek and others would take exception to have it called a traditional Conservative or Liberal riding, but certainly they've been successful in the last 3 elections with John Oliver and Anita Anand, I should say, last 2 elections, where I don't want to predict anything tonight on that one. But I think that's the one where there's a good pickup. Carrie Coburn is an excellent candidate, so I think she gets points for that local connection piece. And I do think that Conservative Oakville is going to come out in force.
Well, I wanted to speak with you as well to get your take on it. For me, I would assume that people would not want to lose Anita or the Liberal government and Prime Minister Trudeau wouldn't want to lose Anita because she has such a big portfolio. Imagine having to sign somebody else if she loses her seat. So is that a scare, do you think? That's just my prediction. What do you think?
I think it's really important that we consider not just these incredible ministerial portfolios that have really proven leaders within the party, but also, especially in COVID, but we also look at that community pulse that some of these appointed ministers in Burlington, we have Karina Gould, Minister of International Economic Development, they're still keeping their community very, very close. They're still seen out having the conversations with constituents. They're still contributing to causes that are near and dear to their constituents' hearts, while at the same time handling these incredible international portfolios. So there's a two-prong approach for that evaluation, and I think both of those ministers have performed with great pressure on them over the pandemic.
But I will say though that the Anita's is a little, it'd be a little tricky to lose for sure, because she has been such responsible for such a big portfolio. Having said that, we're going to hold that there for now. Now we're going to throw it to Jason Agnew in Milton to see what's going on in that riding.
Well, I gotta say, when we got our assignments for what we'd be covering tonight, I was pretty stoked to hear that I was being sent out to Milton, because there is a story to be told in this riding. As you can see, we're currently in front of the office of the incumbent Adam Van Koeverden, and this is someone that is fairly new to the political game, but definitely not new to competition. If you know the name, then you know that he is also a Canadian Olympic gold medalist, competing in the 2004 Olympics and winning gold in kayak. Well, that part of his life ends. He moves his way into the world of politics and decides to show up in Milton and run against conservative Lisa Raitt in 2019, and in a bit of an upset, beats Lisa Raitt, takes her seat, and now fast forward to 2021, Adam Van Koeverden is the incumbent. Now, can someone do that same thing to him tonight? It's an election. You never know. Let's look at who he's going to be competing against. After all, there are 5 parties here in the Milton riding, and let me break it down for you. The NDP candidate in this riding, Mohammed Riaz Sahi, the Green Party candidate, Chris Kowalchuk, and a bit of a wild card as well with the People's Party of Canada putting forth Shibli Haddad. But when it comes right down to it, Milton is a riding that is pretty well known for being conservative. I already told you about Lisa Raitt. She is not running in this election. Instead, the conservative candidate in this area is Nadim Akbar. Now, I've told you about Van Koeverden's background, so it serves me to tell you about Akbar's background as well. It's not a trap, friends. He is a corporate IT consultant. So do you see what we have playing out here? I said it was a story. Essentially, it's like we're in an 80s movie and you have the jock versus the nerd. And when it comes right down to it, one of these two is going to be standing on a podium. The only question is, after tonight or the next couple days on that podium, will they be holding up a keyboard or will they be holding up a kayak? We're going to find out. Back to you, Melissa.
Well, thanks there, Jason. Well, according to the polls that I'm seeing, the jock is going to take it tonight. I don't know. Zishan, both of us live in North Halton, so what's your take on that, jock or nerd?
No, I agree. I think it's Adam's election to lose. Between 2015 and 2019, I was looking at numbers. Milton added 13,000 voters. Based on our turnout, you would expect about 9,000 additional voters, and Adam took every single one of them. Plus, he stole votes from Lisa Raitt as well as from NDP. I don't see the momentum slowing down. So I think Conservatives might do better than they did last time around, but he beat Lisa Raitt by almost 10,000 votes. I think it's a pretty big gap.
But for the overall picture too, I mean, Milton is an important riding for our overall numbers here. And could it be a danger to, Prime Minister's Liberals and the Prime Minister taking some of those votes away from the overall picture here? So you have Nadim Akbar, who has been parachuted in, and you also have people who are angry, some people who have a swing vote. Residents who've traditionally voted Liberal have told me that they might go the other way because they are angry. So where could we go from here? Could there be a shift a little bit here? I know you said that the Conservatives are going to do a little bit better. Do you think they're going to do much better in your case, Jeff? Or what would you say? In Milton? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing about Milton is that Milton's demographics have shifted so much.
That's right.
So, I mean, yes, it once was a bastion of conservatism, but I think that it's a much more swinging riding because of the shifting demographics. It's younger. It's more multicultural. There's a lot of factors which really, I think, play to the strengths of the Liberals. That's not saying that Conservatives can't be competitive there, but I think that it's just not a sure thing anymore. Milton used to be one of those ridings that, when you won the nomination, you won the seat.
Yeah.
And sort of like an Alberta kind of thing, right? But it's not that way anymore. The demographics have definitely had an impact on it.
Well, let's, I think we're going to move on and over because this is a riding. You talk about how traditionally Milton was conservative. It was very easy and demographics have changed. It doesn't seem like demographics changed too much in Wellington, Halton Hills. And we're going to go over to Nikki right now to see how that riding is doing. Nikki.
Thanks, Melissa. We're here in Acton in the riding of Wellington, Halton Hills. Incumbent Michael Chong will be joining us soon here at the Red Harp to join his supporters wait out the evening. Of course, we know this evening is not going to be like any election we've covered before, both with mail-in ballots and COVID restrictions restricting the number of folks who can actually join him here on the patio. Now, Michael Chong has been in this seat since 2004 and will be here all night to see if he pulls off lucky number 7. Should the country start to go blue, we'll have to ask him if he sees himself as the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, as he is the current critic for the Conservatives. With that, we'll throw it back to you.
And so that's my question to all of you. I mean, it seems like it's a no-brainer of who's going to take Wellington, Halton Hills. And even when we hosted the debate last week, he seemed very comfortable there, very sure of himself. So what do you predict? I guess I can go to you, Zishan. What would you say that could you see him being given that portfolio as Foreign Affairs Minister?
Oh, absolutely. Michael Chong is by far my favorite MP ever in the history of the universe.
Okay.
I admire the man tremendously, and I think to Michael Chong party, yes, okay. I'll do that. But no, I think he deserves a large portfolio, and I think he would do awesome at it.
And it's interesting because I know, Jeff, you and I talked a little bit about this off air before we went on, that it depending on where you're voting and what riding you're in, a lot of residents are either choosing to vote strategic, so vote for party, or vote for a candidate. And in our case here in Halton, Wellington, Halton Hills seems to be one of those that you're really voting for your candidate. Michael Chong has traditionally done wonderful things for that riding and continues to do so. So is there any, do you disagree there, or what would you say?
I don't. I mean, it's well known in politics in Canada in the last probably 25, 30 years that local candidacy isn't as important, obviously, as party affiliation. That's a different story in ridings, rural ridings, like Michael Chong's riding. And also, you know, in the case of a community like that, he is such a stalwart, such a community booster, and has a high profile within the party and nationally. The man ran for leadership of the Conservative Party a few years ago, and as a dark horse candidate, really coming from nowhere, he did exceptionally well, and he was to a degree a bit of a kingmaker or tried to be a kingmaker in that election. So I mean, the man certainly punches above his weight, you know, and you know, he's an exceptional MP. I agree with Zishan. He is one of the best MPs I've ever witnessed. And I don't get to deal with him a lot because he represents just a small corner of Halton, but Zishan, you know, is closer to him being up in the Northern Territories.
Not too north.
No, not too
We're
north.
there.
Not too north.
Lisa, I'm going to get your take on this after, but I'm going to throw over to Burlington, and where Kimberly is there right now. And let's go over. Let's see where she's at. Kimberly?
Joining me is the NDP candidate, Nick Page. Nick, this is your first time running an election with the NDP party. What has your experience been?
It's been a lot of fun. It's been different than I was expecting, but it's been good. I've enjoyed talking to people. I've enjoyed just hearing people's concerns and feeling like the NDP is going to do good things for them.
I'd love to hear what people are saying at the doors. When you're outdoor knocking, what is the reception that you're receiving?
It's been generally good. Yeah, it's been pretty good. People are kind of tired of Trudeau, and they're hoping for change, and we're going to provide good change with the NDP. So,
what are the pieces of your platform with the NDP party that you're most excited about the potential for Burlington here?
So the biggest thing in the platform that I'm excited about is the guaranteed livable income for all disabled people and all seniors, for $2,200 to start. I'm really excited about that because I think it's going to build into a truly universal basic income, which will be good for people in Burlington and like all Canadians. to provide a basis for to let people live dignified lives and be able to do what they need to do, what they want to do to be productive.
I'd love to hear about your experience with the other parties and all working together here in Burlington. How has that been for you, Nick?
I enjoyed the debates that I was in with the other parties. The Greens and the Liberals were in 2 or 3 total debates with me, and the Conservatives were in 1. And it was generally a good atmosphere. I liked all of the other candidates personally. They all came across quite well, so it was a good time.
Good. It takes a team. It takes a village, as they say, to come together and really make this happen. There's a lot of volunteers and friends, and everybody steps up to help you out. What has the volunteer experience been like and working with them as well?
Oh, it has been so incredible to have just people show up to do lit drops or to do canvassing or to put up signs or whatever. I never would have expected to get the support that I've gotten. It's been a real experience and a real treat.
That's wonderful. What do you hope to see for Burlington post-election night? What's the big wish?
The big wish is a full NDP government. I think that would be very, very good for all Canadians and all people in Burlington too.
Nick, will you be back again?
I am not opposed. This was a good time and I would do it again.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, so that was our NDP candidate over in Burlington, and I wanted to bring that to you, Lisa, to get a sense of overall how the NDP has done in our riding. It seems like they were the last kind of to show up, and at least in Milton, where they were one of the last to register a candidacy. Does this speak to, I guess, the tactic in which the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the election to kind of have people unprepared, voters and other parties alike? What do you think?
Sure. So just before we answer that really great question, I think we should take a minute to really celebrate neurodivergent candidates that are out there right now. And the NDP did a really terrific job of showcasing and celebrating those that have a platform built on inclusion and access to the policy process. And that to me is a good signal for strong democracy, where we really are welcoming new voices into the democratic process. So hats off to Nick. Thank you so much for running. I think that's a really amazing thing that he had taken on, and what a great interview. So I'm glad that we had that coverage. In Burlington, though, it's traditionally ping-ponged from blue to red, as long as it had been a new federal riding way back in 1979. And those candidates, blue and red, would usually be given a string of wins, and they would last at least a decade or so, or just shy of a decade. So what you see there is a little bit of entrenchment in that voter confidence by those two parties. The NDP, though, did make quite a good showing in the last election with 10.24% of the vote in that Burlington riding. But what we saw between at that time Karina Gould and Jane Michael, Karina Gould being a Liberal, Jane Michael representing the Conservatives, was about just over a 10-point spread, with Karina holding 48% of the vote and Jane Michael holding 33% of the vote. So you can see, though, how the New Democrats did inch into those very traditional ridings. And we have always had in Burlington additional parties coming out and working those edges. So we really see that in the Westminster model, where there is that opportunity to edge in and sort of chew away at the center.
So how do we see then the NDP doing in the other ridings as well? So as I mentioned, I mean, I think one of the tactics, at least in my opinion, for calling a snap election, whoever that may be is in government, is to keep people at the edge of their seat, is what I'm trying to say, and to kind of appear more prepared. But we're also seeing through research and through polling and analysts this entire 6 weeks is that the Trudeau government, or the party, or rather, wasn't as prepared as you would like to think for calling a snap election and to kind of keep the other parties at the edge of their seats. And we're seeing this in some of our ridings where, NDP came in a little bit late, so did a Conservative riding, Green riding as well, or a Green Party candidate as well. So Zishan, what would you say in Milton, what's happening over over there with in terms of the other candidates running?
Yeah, something similar happened in Milton. We didn't have an NDP candidate until the very last moment, which was surprising because even all the way back in May, pretty much everyone knew election was going to be called in the fall. It wasn't a surprise. Come June, July, it was basically certain. And towards the end of July, we were sure that it was going to be an end of September election. So I'm not sure why NDP was caught off guard, but it seems like they were.
Well, I need to point out the fact that the Prime Minister at a couple points during the pandemic said, we're not going to have a pandemic election. Nobody wants a pandemic election. So, I think that like all of us that run businesses or with kids going to school, our lives were uprooted. And I think that is certainly the case in the world of politics as well. You know, parties did not necessarily have the ability to get their members together to choose candidates in the most effective way. It was harder to recruit candidates, harder to raise money, harder to have those events to create profile in the communities. So, while I understand that there was a lot of speculation about the election coming up, I think the Prime Minister really, I wouldn't say he surprised people, but I think he called a worst possible scenario election when he called it. And that, unfortunately, I think put the parties in a difficult position where you start scrambling to find candidates. I mean, I know the Conservatives, for example, and I'm not trying to be critical of my own party, but the Conservatives have a candidate representing Northwest Territories from Thunder Bay. I'm sorry if I've missed the right territory. It's one of the territories, but she lives in Thunder Bay, has never been to the Northwest Territories. And this is because the parties all want to put up 338 candidates in the ridings, and so they scrambled the last minute. If there was more time, then there would have been an opportunity to actually, find really, solid candidates and create the profile in the community and talk about the issues. As it was, 6 weeks is just not a lot of time to get that all done.
Well, we'll hold that thought. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but first we're going to go over to Oakville North Burlington, Deb, right now to see how that riding is doing.
We're here in the riding of Oakville North Burlington at the Haber Recreation Center. All of the parties are represented on the ballot here, but the biggest race, if you believe the polls, is between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Haneen Ruskala is running for her first time. She is a medical doctor representing the Conservatives. Pam Damoff has represented this area since 2015 as a Liberal. And in fact, in 2015 and 2019, she received almost 50% of the vote, but the race was very, very tight. This one is no different. This race is too close to call. In 2019, 71.68% of the eligible voters cast their ballots. And if we're to believe the advanced polls, we could see those numbers again. This is an unusual time with an unusual election, but it's intriguing us all. For Your TV, I'm Deb Timstra.
Unusual election. You said it before we threw to it, Jeff, and you can continue. You can continue on that thought. We did talk about Pam Damoff off air as well, and I wanted you to give you that opportunity to talk about that riding again. But right before, we have a couple minutes before we go to break, but I really wanted to get that discussion going. Sure. So talk about that riding, and really this is another kind of example of voting for your candidate versus voting for party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Oakville North Burlington is one of those constituencies where it's relatively new. First of all, it's a relatively new constituency, and it is a very mixed riding. It hasn't established a tradition yet as to which political party it's going to consider its bellwether. Pam Damoff, as the member of Parliament, has been an exceptional member of Parliament. She's full disclosure, she's a friend of mine. We served on council together. I think she's awesome. She's a great candidate, and I think in that case, there's a lot of folks in my community that believe the same thing. They really like Pam, so I think that Pam will benefit from that little gap of people who are prepared to vote candidate over party. If they really want to pick somebody that is, a representative, that's in the community, about the community, serving the constituents, then Pam, will have a really big leg up in that constituency.
Well, we'll wait and see, but it is looking likely for sure. Okay, but we are going to we do have some numbers coming in, but we're going to take a quick break right here. We'll have more of that as we go in. There's some of our numbers right now. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Your Vote here on Your TV Halton. As we threw to break, we showed you some results coming in for Burlington. Let's show some of that results again. There you are. Karina Gould with 51. Of course, that's just one poll reporting right now, so still very early. But I mean, come on, it looks like what we've all pretty much predicted. A little interesting, though, is the PPC getting a couple votes in there. I want to talk to you about that, actually. I want to talk about the PPC to all of you, and an interesting time that it was, or that it is, for the party. I think I believe last run they had maybe 1% of the vote, if I'm not mistaken. This time around, polls are suggesting they're going to do a little bit better. Unlikely to get a seat, though, but I wanted to get a sense from, maybe Jeff, I'm going to start with you, that there is this kind of rhetoric in these past several weeks that finally there is a party that can pull from the Conservatives. So I don't know if, in your estimation, with your extensive experience in politics, because you do have quite extensive experience. I'm not calling you old, I swear. Very wise, I should say. But yeah, just basically what your take on this, just having that sort of political background and seeing now a party that seems to be pulling more from the right.
Yeah, I think that the PPC pulls from two actual directions. I think they pull from the right. They pull from the folks on the far right side of the political spectrum, but they also pull from those who are just fed up with everything. So I mean, the folks that are have anti-vax attitudes or anti-mask attitudes, or who feel lockdowns are conspiracy driven. There's a whole group of people that find a home in the PPC. I mean, listen, I don't want to criticize any political party. Anybody that puts their name forward for election needs to be congratulated for doing it. And people, when they go out and vote for voting for PPC is, if that's what we want to do, then that's your democratic right. But they certainly do seem to be a collection of people that are just not happy with what's happening in our society. So, I mean, I think last time it was the right wing of the party, the ultra-right wing of the party left the Conservatives with Max Bernier. There were a lot of folks that after the leadership, when Andrew Scheer won, were really upset that Max didn't win, because he was sort of supposed to win that election, that leadership. That's right. Yeah. And they sort of packed up their kit and they followed Max to his new party. I think that the reality is last time, and we're seeing it. I don't know. We're not seeing numbers much from Ontario, but if you look at the numbers that have already been touted for the East Coast, you'll find the Green Party has collapsed in the East Coast. Whether that holds up across the country, I'm not sure. Last time, the protest party was the Green Party. That's right. And so what's happening now is that I think those people that may have said, I can't vote for Andrew Scheer, I can't vote for Justin Trudeau. This shows how old I am. And so I'm going to park my vote here. Now it's the PPC or the Rhino Party in Burlington. Right.
That's right. That's a nice transition there, Lisa. Let's talk about that. Why do you think these fringe party comes up, like the Rhino Party? PPC, they have some stick in the game because they did form before all of this happened. Can you talk about just your thoughts on these parties that are coming up? Is it because they have no choice left? They feel like they have no choice? Or is it really, I'm just going to make fun of our electoral process?
I think we have seen year over year, election over election, people becoming more and more disenfranchised in the electoral system. We talked now about some of the dialogue that was going about just because of why are we having an election in the first place, right? So it automatically casts a negative light on what we should value as such a beautiful, very, very respected democratic process that we have here in our country of Canada. And I think people at the root of the human condition is just they want to be heard. And I don't think any party can be everything to everyone, but by virtue of first past the post or the Westminster system, what we have to do is get a majority to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people. And what that creates is a condition where you can do vote splitting and you can do strategic voting and things like that. And in fact, I'm looking right now, since we were talking about the PPC party, and on their live Twitter, so 3 hours ago only, a vote for quote, a vote for O'Toole is a vote for Trudeau, #vote PPC. So even within the parties themselves are promulgating or prospecting off of chomping into those other voters who may traditionally line up with a more traditional party. So again, at the end of the day, it's human nature, and if people have a very specific political platform that they want others to engage in, this is one of the ways for them to do it.
Well, sure, and I mean, it's funny that the PPC were tweeting that, because I think it was yesterday, the day before, the Conservatives were saying a vote for PPC was a vote for the Liberal government. So, I mean, they're playing strategic voting here within the political parties. And the one riding that, interestingly enough, is Wellington Halton Hills. And Z, I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but the Sil Carl is actually one of the founding members of the PPC. So he's one of the ones that you talked about, Jeff, that joined in because he believes in the PPC as it was traditionally set out to accomplish. So I don't know if you had any interactions or dealings with Sil or what that person is like up at the PPC, but there's a disconnect between someone like Sil who believes in it, and then you have those that are anti-vax rhetoric, or those that want to vote because they're mad at the way the electoral system is right now. And for someone like Sil, would that kind of discourage you or just kind of make you angry, like you're not really part of this party for the right reasons?
No, I think that is one of the reasons. That's one of the things the party is promoting. So I think that's one of the right reasons for picking the party. In the previous election, Green Party and PPC combined together had roughly 9 to 10% of support.
Right.
And I think Jeff is correct. What's going to happen this time around is that Green support will collapse, PPC support will go up, but they'll average around the same around the same percentage. And I think PPC is stealing most of the votes from the Conservative Party, but there's also anti-mask sentiments among supporters of other parties, and they're going to PPC as well.
So before we just continue on with that conversation, we had more polls come in. I think I'm just seeing there from Burlington, a couple more that numbers trickling in there. If we could just pull that up on our screen. Okay, there's that jump. Okay, Karina Gould, 206. Emily Brown, 105 with 5 polls. Of course, still early, but does this surprise you, Lisa?
It's a challenge to be surprised. Similar to Councillor Knoll's commentary around relatively new candidates to the scene, Emily does boast a strong history in Hamilton, but many in the community have said, you know, who is Emily? And she didn't appear at some of the big debates, especially the environmental debate, knowing that climate crisis is on the top of many people's minds, many voters' minds. We talked about demographic shifts as well. That's happening in Burlington too. We're seeing younger, more engaged voters as well, and climate change is a major priority. So the reason we're here on this panel is because we need to understand what these election results are going to mean for our constituents in Halton at large.
Yeah.
And terrifically, Halton Region sent out a survey to all of the candidates across all of the ridings and all of the parties, and I'm looking here to learn more, and I don't see answers for Emily's, but I see answers for the other candidates. So I think it's not surprising for our very thirsty constituency in Burlington that want to be politically engaged, politically charged, know who their candidates are, and I think that that reliance perhaps, Jeff, on the party banner may not have served her as well as she may have expected. But again, we're at 2% of the votes coming in. Time will tell, not to jump to conclusions. You know, we are in a very dynamic time right now, but that's really big to be up against a multiple election incumbent and to be new to the scene, similar to your point, Jeff, about coming on now. I think that might have something to do with it, but that's a big wedge.
But I was going to say strategic voting at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, having said that, I mean, we've seen lots of elections in the past. I think 1984 federal election, 1990 provincial election, where when party becomes such a predominant feature of the election, especially when you're voting against something, so dogmatically. I think that it almost becomes irrelevant who the local candidate is, and you end up with people who otherwise would never be elected because the party just happens to be on that wave. I remember in 1984 like it was yesterday.
Was it?
I'm just playing up the fact you called me old earlier. And I mean,
Wise.
wise, thank you. There were candidates, like conservative candidates that got elected under Brian Mulroney's banner that had, frankly, I'll be honest, I mean, there's enough statute of limitations. I can't be held accountable for my words now, but there was enough candidates out there that should never have been elected.
Right.
Because they were standard bearers, or as I refer to them sometimes, sacrificial lamb candidates in ridings that you just can't win.
Well, in Milton, I don't know. I've tried to reach out to Nadine Makbar, but no luck. So, I mean, but did you have more success than I did, Z?
I'm not sure what's up with conservative candidates and skipping debates.
Yeah. Right?
Sorry, Jeff.
I've never skipped a debate, but then
You've never been a conservative federal candidate, have you?
not federal. I've been provincial. There you go.
Specifically federal.
But we're seeing that similar trend that you were seeing in Burlington. We're seeing that in Milton too. So is there, I mean, this brings up my point. So voters might be looking to punish the Prime Minister for calling an election in these pandemic times. And could our incumbents be the sacrificial lambs in that, the victims of this? Do you think that, well, maybe not so much in Milton, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't see that happening in Milton. I think Adam has actually worked really hard. Adam is generally well liked. He's a machine when it comes to canvassing and campaigning. He's done a really good job. And I think candidates, for whatever the reasons might be, skipping debates, it does a disservice to democracy, but also there is a constituency, there are a number of voters that actually look at debates to decide which way to go.
That's true.
And it's a shame because it's a missed opportunity, in my opinion.
I was teasing, actually. I think it's terrible to skip debates. I think debates are one of the few opportunities that people get to actually do comparison shopping. And I think it's terrible when candidates do that. Certainly there's sometimes scheduling issues. But I mean, I've never been, and I've been in a number of elections because I've been serving as a councillor here in Oakville for a number of years. I'm not going to tell you how long. And the reality is that you can often negotiate and find time. So there's no excuse not to be at the debates. I mean, really, there isn't. And I was joking earlier. So
no, yes, I think we're all here really taking this seriously. And we didn't get to host a Milton debate because of that reason too. So I will just leave it at that. We do have our first poll in Oakville come in. So those are the results there. And looks like what we're predicting has happened. So I know it's only one, but the close race between Anita and Carrie, that's a little closer than I guess maybe Anita might be comfortable with. Jeff, what do you say?
Well, I mean, it is, I think you said one poll, correct? That looks like one poll. That very well could be Anita's neighborhood. I mean, it's very hard to tell early trends, right, from one or two polls. So you got to be really careful drawing conclusions from that. But I mean, yeah, I'm kind of surprised there's that much of a margin, but again, we have to see. I would love to know where that is, because there's certain parts of the Oakville riding that would tend to be more liberal than conservative, but it's early times.
Yeah, ridings are generally not evenly distributed.
Yeah,
you have pockets.
Yeah.
So you have rural pockets and condo pockets and urban pockets and suburban pockets, and they vote differently.
So when should we start worrying as these numbers continue to come in? I mean, we may not get them all tonight.
When you see me start to sweat,
right?
That's when
good indication.
That's a good indication.
This is why I put you right across from me, Jeff.
No, I'd say, in my opinion, once you get to 20 to 30% of the polls, and you can start seeing trends develop, and I think that's when things really start to firm up.
Okay.
That's what I've seen in the past. That's been my experience. And that's certainly what, in my own elections, that's kind of the point when I either breathe a sigh of relief or start getting panicked.
Well, good to know. Well, I'm sure our viewers, you're seeing in the side of your screen, though, but we have more polls coming in for Burlington. They seem to be coming quicker. So if you could take a look, let's pull up a full screen of that just to give people a little bit more of an indication. So there you go with Karina with 629, Emily with 401, Nick Page 139, Michael Bader with 43, and Green Party with 28. Now, traditionally, you might have touched on this a little bit, Lisa, but how has the Green Party done traditionally in the Burlington riding from your experience?
Sure.
Is this good for them early on? Is this bad for them?
I would say it's still too early to tell. The Green Party actually happens to be one of those parties in Burlington that tie in closer more success with the person more than the politics.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's true.
Traditionally, what the voter turnout and what the votes looked like is that they would, if they were to have sort of a bigger name, they would get more votes. Even election to election, from 2015 to 2019, a huge jump from 1,700 up to 4,700. That's a big jump in a small window, and I think a lot of that has to do with the individuals. The best it's really done is not as high as it should, but when it does push into the red and into the Liberals with a stronger campaign platform around environmental considerations, carbon neutrality, climate crisis, that's when you see some of those votes fall away from the green and find a new home over in the red. So when we do have those platforms, when we talk about what the candidates right now are putting at the forefront, climate is heavy on the red, and it's not as heavy, Jeff, unless you want to beg to differ, on the blue. So we're seeing those greens find a home for their vote there.
I want to get back to that, so hold that thought. We do have an interview with Emily Brown now, so we're going to throw to that interview with Kim.
Thanks, Melissa. We're live here in Burlington outside Emily Brown, the Conservative candidate's constituency office. Emily, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. It's really great to see you.
We are starting to get numbers in. Things are getting exciting. How has this election been for you?
It's been short, very fast, and we had a great team behind me, so we pushed forward, and in this 35 days we have knocked on thousands and thousands of doors and met so many people in Burlington. Such great support, so I'm really positive about tonight.
I'd love to hear what you're hearing at the doors. What are people saying when you're knocking? What are the conversations?
Well, largely it's about getting past the pandemic and moving forward, so our Secure the Future plan is just exactly what people want to hear. And we were able to offer them some hope about securing jobs, securing the economy, and so on. So very positive.
Let's talk about that plan. What are you most excited about from your policies moving forward with the Conservative Party?
Well, I think, securing jobs. I was out for dinner tonight before coming here, and they're reducing hours because they can't get staff. So I've heard that a lot at the door. Small business owners just can't get people to work, and they're worried about their business even succeeding after the pandemic. So we've got a plan for that, and that's very positive. That's what I'm hearing most.
What has it been like working with the volunteers and the team? Everybody, as you mentioned, has come together so fast to make this happen. What is that experience like for you?
Well, I've met so many phenomenal people, and they've just, held me up and pushed me forward and just been there for everything that we've needed. And, as we talked earlier, I went straight from a nomination race into a campaign, and so we just kind of morphed, and all that energy just was behind me, and it's just been amazing.
What is your hope for Burlington moving forward?
Well, the hope is, of course, to have a Conservative MP, and that would be, the greatest thing that could happen here. And I think just seeing Burlington return to, a city that we've got people at work, people enjoying the beautiful lakefront, people who, are happy about the infrastructure, changes that could be coming, and more affordable housing. So I think it's very positive.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. Back to you, Melissa, at the desk.
Thanks, Kim. So let's take a look at those numbers again. In Burlington, we had more polls come in. There you go with Emily that we just spoke with, 474. Karina still leading with 733. So it seems like, at least in Halton, it's the war between the Reds and the Blues. I'm sure it's like that for most of Ontario. So Lisa, you've heard that interview. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So many of the issues that she brought up are very important issues. We do have a housing crisis on our hands. We want to make housing affordability top of mind for people looking to have the right for housing. So really important. We want to have a strong economy. We want to get those jobs back. I know that under Erin O'Toole's platform, it's looking to recover the 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic. We know in Halton that economic strength is something that we're very proud of. So Halton is generally a very highly educated workforce. We also have ample skills and development training that's here in Halton, and we know that we will get our economy back on track, of course, once we subside the pandemic. So really aligned with what's important to people, and I think that that's on the mind of all the candidates as we try to get out of the pandemic and into recovery.
Well, what do you think, Jeff, her being a Conservative candidate for the Burlington riding? I mean, you're a unapologetic Conservative, so do you think this... You're sorry.
I'm sorry for being unapologetic.
Don't be. So let's, your take on this, just with your background with the Conservatives, is this strong enough to kind of hedge over Karina? Again, I know we're early, but that was a pretty strong interview there, and she really did touch on a lot of the key issues that were important, as Lisa mentioned.
Yeah, she seems very well spoken. I don't know this particular candidate. I mean, that was a good interview, absolutely. I noticed that the numbers are getting closer in Burlington, so I think that some of that Conservative wave I was talking about a little bit earlier might be happening in the Halton area. I mean, I certainly think that you know, she sounds to be very credible. I wish I knew more about her, but she sounds like a very credible candidate, and she seems to have a bit of a pulse on Burlington, which is a good thing, because that's not always the case. You know, sometimes when you get candidates that aren't from that community, they come in and they just run, and like it just, you know, it's not about the community, it's just about the party. You know, Aaron O'Toole says this, Aaron O'Toole says that, instead of talking about the fact that, you know, there is a waterfront. to
resonate with the constituents there. And well, speaking on your area, Oakville, we do have numbers there coming in. So let's put up the full screen there. Still 5 polls, early,
it's
but
early. 7%
close.
spread, yeah.
That's tight though. But I mean, if this continues to stay on this trend, how tight they are, then a lot of the panelists and you know, analysts that we've seen over these last 6 weeks were correct in that it was a close, or it is very close, between Anita and Kerry, hence why the nice visits from our Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservatives.
Yeah, leaders don't show up in ridings that are sure things. So I mean, if you see a leader show up in a riding, you know that it's winnable, but not there yet, because that's how they allocate that resource. Both, as you said, both the Liberals and the Conservatives had the leader show up in the riding in the last minute. So I think both were concerned about. One was concerned about losing the riding, and the other was concerned about the possibility of winning it. So I think that that's very indicative. I mean, it's a 7-point spread right now. It is early, and again, we don't know where those numbers are coming from. If that's from Southeast Oakville, then Kerry has a problem. If that's from Southwest Oakville, then you know, Anita has a problem. So it really depends on you know, where we are at this point. I don't have enough information to give you. What I can tell you is that clearly it does not look like the PPC is really siphoning that many votes in Oakville.
No, but we can see Oriana Knox there with at least 9 votes. So the Greens are there. But yes, as you mentioned earlier, all of you seem to think that it unfortunately will be a collapse, because they do have some great party platform issues. Z.
Speaking of Green collapse, one riding that I've been watching for a while is Kitchener. We're going to talk about Halton, but Green is actually leading in Kitchener right now.
Oh, well, there we go. So
is that their numbers are leading in Kitchener?
Yeah, wow. So far 34%. Mike Morris.
You know, one of the problems with the Green Party is that not only are people maybe moving their protest votes, but they've had significant leadership issues.
That's right.
I mean, they're at war within their own party, and that I think has certainly an impact on their field of candidates and their electoral winnability.
I will say, though, the thing that impressed me the most in Halton Hills was the Green Party candidate Ranju. So he is 27, university grad, had a lot to say, and when I met him, seemed very nervous. And then as soon as the lights went on for our debate, he gave more than he got. And I thought that his passion and his rhetoric about the youth need to now come up to fight for what they believe in, is in particular when it comes to the environment. And I think we're going to get to issues in a second. But I would say that I guess it speaks to what I think it was you, Jeff, or no, and Lisa, both of you, at different points, that with Greens you're really voting for what you believe in at that point, as opposed to, of course, you know, the politics of it all, which is kind of refreshing, I would say.
It is. It is. You know, I have to wonder one thing about the Greens. So, in particular, focused in on Halton, all of the Halton municipalities and the region of Halton have all called a climate emergency declaration. And we sit technically in two tiers, city and region. So, I wonder if there's, I don't know if I want to use the word false, or if there's just a sense that someone's got the environment on their lens, and someone out there is doing something for the environment, and that's where our regional advocacy goes up. And that's why it's important that we know who is getting voted in at the federal, at the provincial level, because these are our partners in funding our policies and our policy initiatives. So I wonder if, with all of the coverage and all of, you know, we've seen youth and many come out in climate protests city after city. I'm wondering if some of that is you know, kind of manifesting itself across platforms and across different political levels, where it's almost making the Green Party redundant because it's so baked in.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that was going to be my next question, because you know, the Liberals platform and even the NDP has some, and to an extent, Conservatives as well. They all have something to deal with climate change. Although, I mean, the Conservatives most of them don't believe that climate change exists.
Well, in fairness, that was a membership vote, not a
True,
caucus vote.
true.
So I mean, and that's frankly, that's a bit of a badge of shame that vote happened, and the leader of the party has totally renounced that vote. I mean, the platform clearly identifies climate change as an issue, and has steps that they feel strongly that they want to take in order to help deal with the issue. So, I mean, yeah, you can look at some of those fringe votes, and from party membership, and again, you're getting a lot of those folks that maybe on the far right side of the party that don't buy into climate change. But I mean, they don't speak for all of us in the Conservative Party. I, for one, as a red Tory, I certainly do believe in climate change, and I do believe that the environment must always be the number one issue that we deal with, notwithstanding anything else. That if we don't have a robust and safe ecology, we have nothing.
Well, and certainly with Milton and Halton Hills, I mean, we've got Conservation Halton, and we're surrounded. Well, all of Halton, really, we're surrounded by these beautiful green belts and things that we need to protect, while at the same time monitoring growth. We still need to grow. So, I mean, Z, how do you balance that, and who is best to balance that growth while keeping the things, the greenery, the scenery that we enjoy so much in such an urban center? How do we do that?
Yeah, in the context of this election, a lot of that happens at the provincial level as well.
True,
a lot of those policies are really provincial. But in the context of this election, just to reiterate what everyone else said, credit where credit is due. Justin Trudeau's Liberals did go pretty heavily on carbon pricing, despite the criticism. And once again, Erin O'Toole as well acknowledged during the English language debate that Conservatives traditionally haven't done a very good job. He apologized for it, and he said they will do better. So you're right. I think Green Party's traditional platform has been taken up by all these different parties, which is actually testament to the success.
So what do you think they need to do to change? They have to find some. Are you saying that they have to find something else? They have to find new footing, a new direction?
I think they need to first settle the civil war within the party before they do anything else.
Right.
I just want to point out to you something interesting just popped up on my feed. The CBC has already called the election for the Liberals.
Really?
Yeah, that's pretty early days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they will form polls. Yeah, they've called it. I'm waiting to see the next messages from the other networks. That's interesting.
You're not wrong. Global is calling 131 seats for Liberals, 74 for the Conservatives, and we're just a handful of seats left. But even at that, that's a big advance.
Well,
nobody expected that. We were talking about election results for days.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's what I was saying, because if you think about the mail-in votes, it was a record number of mail-in voting, and actually, and also advanced polling was record-breaking as well. So we thought I actually mentioned it early on our newscast here on the program that we might not see anything up to 4 days later, but it seems like they're calling it. That's
I mean,
That's very interesting.
They said days later, and it could be the fastest call ever in the history of Canadian elections.
I've seen premature calls. I think I would wait.
Yeah, of course. We've got, what time is it? 10:20? We've got another hour, guys.
Yeah.
So we're good. But we also need to see some results from our writing there. Let's pull up some numbers on the full screen. Nothing for Milton. I promise you'll get to talk there, Z, about our Milton writing. But here's some of our Burlington numbers coming in, and we can go to Oakville as well. Wellington, Halton Hills. We're seeing some numbers come in for Wellington, Halton Hills, so we can pull that up next as well. There we go. Michael Chong leading. Obviously, no surprise. Melanie Lang, the Liberals.
Those numbers should hold all night. Those sorts
Yeah.
of percentages I would expect in Wellington, Halton Hills.
Yeah, and I would have expected Karina Gould to have a comfortable lead as well, which she does. I think Oakville is the one to watch, especially with advanced folks.
You did call it. I want to get it.
I think Anita will win the riding, but yes, I do think it's going to be close.
Okay, we're putting money on this, or you call Anita, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Let's do it.
I'm not going to bet money.
Bragging rights then. So let's get back to the issues. I mean, we touched on the environment and how that pertains to Halton, but you touched on it, Lisa, and so did Emily. Housing and affordability, renting, and it is astronomically ridiculous here in Halton, really pretty much everywhere, but I want to talk about locally. I have not seen housing prices jump this much. How is someone like myself able to afford a house in this riding, and what do each party, or what do they bring forward that could deal with that housing issue? It's not really a one solution fix all, I'm afraid. So
I'm not going to put words in the candidates' mouths. I'm going to tell you what Burlington is doing. So Burlington is doing its housing strategy. It has a working group, an engaged working group, and I'm looking to both of the candidates' websites because I think that this is very much a top of mind issue. People are saying, how can I ever afford a home here? And the speculation is going up and the supply is not where they want it to be. I have been on record saying I don't believe it's a simple supply and demand. The supply is insatiable for the prices to go down. If you're in a capitalist market, the most amount of supply will still not drive prices down to the point where we can meet those Halton affordability numbers, which are hovering around like $280,000 for a home. So I want to be really careful with all that all the words that we're using, whether it's housing affordability, affordable housing, supportive housing. So there is very much a housing continuum that needs to be satisfied in order to give people places to live with dignity. So I'm not seeing much on Emily's website. I do see, I want to give credit where credit's due. I see an environmental plan, I see a recovery plan, and I see about the candidate. So that's what I see there. I'll pop over to the answer from, and this is why it's so important to answer surveys, because I'm going to our Halton Region survey, and Karina Gould indicates that the Liberals will launch Canada's first national housing strategy, an ambitious 10-year plan investing over $72 billion to build and supply and make housing affordable and address chronic homelessness. So we can all say that it's a problem and that we're going to take steps to correct it. I think we're at the point now where we are in crisis and we need real concrete strategies and plans.
Jeff, is that plan going to work, or is there more to it at play here? Because there's so many factors that's causing this unaffordability, and yes, you're right, there are different facets of when you talk about housing, and there are different meanings for each. I mean, even Halton Hills, just on a municipal level, they're going through an affordable housing strategy because they have an aging population there. There are seniors who can't afford homes with dignity, as you say. So they're trying to find ways to do that without so much, and I guess this applies to Halton, out too much to, of course, impede on our environment. So there's a challenge there. Can that work? What's the other solution?
I think my concern about some of the, and I'll say this for all the platforms, they talk about very simplistic measures to fix housing, and there is no simple fix, and every level of government has a piece of this. The provincial government has to deal with planning issues. For example, things like inclusive zoning and targets on affordable housing and things like that actually are embedded in the Planning Act, so that developers, I'm starting to sound like a non-conservative anymore, but I mean, developers need to be part of the solution here in the sense that they need to be contributing to the affordability situation. So there's a piece for all of us. In Halton Region, and this is a commercial for the three of us, I mean, we work very hard on this issue. We have a comprehensive housing strategy for the region. We've done very well, particularly on the supportive housing piece, because that's something we have direct control of. We operate the Halton Housing Corporation. I was proud to be president for 15 years. Z was, you're my vice chair for one period, right?
I was not, but I was a member.
You were a member.
I was a director.
You acted as if you were the vice chair.
I was just overseeing you both.
That's right. Yes. Lisa's really in charge. That was the key. But I mean, it's we continually grow our supportive housing, our subsidized housing portfolio every year, more so than most communities. I'm very proud of the record that we have in that regard. But the issue of market affordability, that's the one issue that I get really frustrated listening to all the parties on this, because nobody is really addressing the core issue. And that is that this is a multi-partite problem that needs to be solved at all levels, or as they say at AMO, all orders of government.
Right.
From planning to housing supply policy to rent, all those sorts of things, incentives around rentals, changing the way the tax system works in terms of charging the way they charge commercial tax on high-rise apartments. So if you're a renter in an apartment building that's a strictly rental building, you're paying commercial tax rates, whereas if you live in a building across the street that looks identical and happens to be a condo, you're paying residential rates. So all these pieces contribute to the unaffordability. And let me say one more thing. I'm sorry to take up the time, because I feel really strongly about this. I've been talking about this for 20 years. One of the biggest things that I, as a father, I have 5 kids, and they're all adults now. And the reality is that they all lived in Oakville for a period of time, but they've all now had to leave. The only person who lives in Oakville now is the one that lives in my house. The rest of them, I have one in St. Catharines, one in Gatineau, Quebec, and one in Burlington. And that's because they couldn't find affordable housing. I don't know how they found it in Burlington, to be honest with you, but they did. And that's something, if we don't stop politicking on this and we don't start getting actually really into this on a multi-level government basis, we're never going to solve this issue.
Well, and Z, I want to bring you in here because I know, like in our riding, there's a lot of young families in Milton, and how do you address that? I mean, and how do you incentivize? For example, you brought up we have to get developers to kind of come to the game, but how do you convince a developer to, hey, can you make some houses, like how do you do that? And in particular with Milton, there's like the cheapest house that people can get is like a 1-bedroom condo for 500 plus. Like how does someone do that?
Where do I sign up?
And that's new build, okay? Listen, that's what happened to me. Bought a new build for about $440, and I had to go new build because I couldn't get anything else, and it's a condo. And there's nothing wrong with condos at all, but that's it. There's really, I find, maybe no supply in Milton. What do you say to that? Am I wrong here?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. It's a serious issue. And like Jeff said, it's a multi-pronged approach, a multi-government issue. At a federal level, there is a lot of money coming into the country. Mayor Tory, a couple of years ago, mentioned, and I'll take him on his word, that the city of Toronto had 60,000 empty units. They were purchased by investors and they were just sitting empty.
Right.
So when you take inventory out of the market, it's not that those homes aren't built. They're built. They're just not available to rent. Rental apartments, that's another one. We need to build more purpose-built rental units so kids can move out of homes and start their lives somewhere. We need to have more, not just affordable, but more and more housing where first-time buyers can come and purchase wherever they live, wherever they've grown up. And we've had this culture where people have been moving further and further and further away from the core, and they have nowhere else to go now.
Well, which is causing the environmental issue, because you're causing more commuters to go into their place of work instead of working and living and playing where they are. So I believe we have some polls coming in from Milton now. We're going to go to break. As we check on those polls, we'll talk more about that when we come back. Okay, so those are the results trickling in for Milton. 3% of the polls reporting, with Adam Van Koeverden leading with 403. Nadim Akbar second with 226. We've got the NDP at 99. Chris Kowalchuk at 20. Last. Pretty much, I think all the Greens have been doing last in all the ridings so far. And we do have the PPC up there with 27. So, Zishan, this is no surprise to you, of course?
No, this is exactly what I predicted earlier today. And one of the things that I was watching was PPC, and that's not a surprise either. I think they are exactly where I expected them to be.
It's interesting, though, that I know it's no surprise. Do you think with the PPC, we talk about there's a mix of voters here. So we have the ones that do believe in what their party platform is, and then we have the ones who are angry about everything else and who are just voting PPC because of what they're running for, which is no vaccine passports, no lockdowns, and so on and so forth. Do you think that trend, I know I don't want to talk about the next federal election, but do you think that trend is going to kind of die off by that point because people are going to be less angry about what's been going on right now? What do you think? Is this kind of like a one-time deal?
I don't think so. I think we're in this for a while. When you look at the fact we're coming into fall, the fourth wave's here, those restrictions are going to stay in place. I mean, we've already heard the province say we're not getting out of phase 3 anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, I run a business that we hope that we were going to be more than 50% capacity, and we're stuck there. And on Wednesday we start enforcing vaccine passports at the door. I had one of my longtime customers call me a fascist on Friday because I'm enforcing the provincial policy. Or the provincial law, not policy. It's actually the law. So I don't think we're going to see the other side of the controversy anytime soon. I think these folks are really cleaved to their position and they're going to stick to it.
Okay, before we continue on, we have a poll in from Oakville North Burlington. We're going to show it on your screen right there. There we go. Pam Demoff leading with 316, and Hanan Rizkala at 222, and the NDP at third. Pretty much this is the same pattern all over Halton. You see that red, blue, yellow, darker blue, purple for PPC, and green last. So definitely no surprise that we're seeing this in this riding as well. Still too early to tell, but I guess you think this pattern's going to hold pretty much for all of the ridings. We're going to see this.
That's kind of my prediction.
Yeah.
Except for Oakville, of course. I thought
Right.
Oakville was going to be more competitive. I mean, it's still early.
Yeah,
we
it
don't
is
know
still
yet, but the rest of them, I'm not at all surprised about.
One of the issues I wanted to talk about too, I know we were kind of talking about issues here, and I wanted to continue on that conversation, is and in certain parts of rural Burlington has this issue, is digital infrastructure and infrastructure in general. Before Halton can really move forward, urbanizing and like really developing, we need that infrastructure there, especially getting back to business. It's all part of the recovery as well. Is this something that you think helped people swing or help people decide who they were going to vote for? Zishan, we'll start with you because I know there were some particular areas in Halton Hills and in Milton that really need digital infrastructure.
Rural internet is a massive issue in rural Milton, but I don't think it swayed voters that much. I think it does have the conversation at the municipal level, but when it comes to federal, there was some funding that Adam and Koeverden announced in Milton. It had some impact, but I don't think it was a major issue this election.
What about for Burlington? I know there's a rural area in there.
Yeah, same. So it's most certainly top of mind for those rural voters, and we know that as we're continuing into more and more of a digital environment, we need that strong broadband. But the investments have been made, but I mean, this is the type of infrastructure that you don't just build overnight, like any infrastructure. So the pressure is on, the pressure is mounting. We have been very strong advocates at our Halton table with all of our different advocacy avenues, associations of municipalities of Ontario. If we remember back, actually, Premier Ford had listed broadband as one of the top 5 priorities at the provincial level. So we know that it's very, very important because we want connected communities and we want people to have access to that broadband.
You brought up an interesting point there that the candidate Adam Van Koeverden had made some sort of announcement on behalf of the federal government in terms of digital infrastructure. Is that strategic to do that, especially right before calling an election? He also announced expanding Milton Go as well. Jeff, I'll throw it over to you because I'm sure you have thoughts on this. What is that strategic?
It's definitely strategic. I mean, it's playing on, I think, to a certain degree, the confusion of the public about who does what. To be honest with you, I think a federal member announcing, provincial infrastructure, is a little bit of a stretch. I mean, it's great. It's great for Milton, absolutely. I mean, I lots of friends in Milton. I'm a regional councillor, so I have an interest in representing, the constituents of Milton as much as I do Oakville and Burlington. So I'm sure they're thrilled with that, but that's really provincial jurisdiction. But it's very popular, and it's something that people, it's top of mind.
Well, Zishan, so if I were to ask you, does that do our constituents in Milton a disservice to be confusing like that? So we already have issues, even you as regional councillor, differentiate what you can do as regional councillor and what it goes to the province and what goes. So does it do a disservice? Was this a good play by Adam to do this? And what do you think the result was to come of that, in particular with the Go train announcement?
Yeah, I think so. On one hand, I'll take any money. Just do whatever. Just give me money. We're good.
Sure.
But that said, though, I think to some extent it does, because it also sets some unrealistic expectations. Because the all-dray Go service announcement that made, really what we need is the provincial government to come in. CP needs to come on board. There needs to be a lot of contract. There needs to be a second line. It's at least a 20-year project if everyone's on the table today, which isn't the case. So it does do a lot of disservice, I think.
And that same kind of, theme goes into childcare as well. So that was a huge issue here in Halton. Childcare, $10 a day, the Liberals were announcing. There was a subsidy up to 75% for the Conservatives, their plan, and depending on which you like better, it's still something for childcare. Normally, it's a provincial jurisdiction, right? So, and I know there's funding that obviously trickles down from the federal government, but this is definitely something that they knew was an issue, particularly during the pandemic. Predominantly women, had to leave work to take care of their kids. So is there a sense of, a duty to the federal governments or the candidates, in the federal parties to talk about these issues and do something in order to convince our voters to vote for them? Anyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't need to put stats out there today to show how negative the pandemic has been on women. It's even got its own term called the she-covery, because so many women, not just for childcare reasons, but also elder care reasons, have had to step out of the workforce. And we know that women contribute so much to the workforce, representing about 50% of the population. So in order for them to help be part of that economic recovery, which is important to all parties, we need to talk about root causes of what's keeping women out of the workforce, and whether it's continued education, whether it's access to childcare, no matter what it is. Many women also struggle with transit and being able to get to and from the workplace, especially on those hours if they have to also be juggling childcare. So I do know that all of the parties have put forward plans. I know that, again, going back to my responses to Halton Region, Karina's been a strong advocate for high quality, affordable, and accessible early learning systems. But the reality is, platform over platform, childcare is nearly unaffordable. There are so many women before the pandemic that I know had to step out of the workforce because their salary and what they would earn and what they would pay for childcare netted them out at zero. But they'd have to work for basically no money just in order to keep their place within the workforce hierarchy. So we do need to have a change there, because women are becoming stronger and stronger, and we're looking for seats at the tables and making our own tables. So we do need a public, and I think the main question boils down to, how can we get access to publicly funded childcare? Because right now it's predominantly private, unless you have particular circumstances. How do we make this more widely accessible?
I think one thing, I want to jump in, I'm sorry. I think one thing we have to do is we have to stop talking about it, and let's actually start doing something about it. Because all the parties have talked about this, and they talk about it, and they talk about it. Even in the Liberal platform last time, there was childcare promises, and they just didn't have, the provinces made childcare promises. We have to stop talking, it's like housing. We have to stop talking about it and stop using it as an election plank and actually start doing something about it.
Yeah, and I think it's a miss by the Conservative Party, because I felt that this was an issue they could have taken a lead on, because they could have really targeted the Liberals and not keeping their promise. And $10 a day childcare is a very catchy slogan, and it appeals to a lot of people.
Expensive slogan too.
Sure, but
is.
it appeals to a lot of people. It's simplistic. You can understand it. The conservative plan boggled my mind. Like,
a
what's
bucket beer.
going on? Like, it's hey, man, it works.
So we have 10 minutes left in the show. I wanted to cycle through the results here of what we have. We have Oakville right now with 18% of the vote or the polls reporting. So there you go. Anita Anand with 3,100 or over almost 3,200 votes there. Carrie at second with 26. Pretty much the same trend we've seen all night so far. Let's head to the next poll. Oakville North Burlington, Pam Demoff there. I think that's 47 polls reporting, or
That can't be right.
right. And then we've got Oakville with 47 polls reporting. Let's go to Oakville right now. Oh, we're going to go to Burlington right now with Karina Gould leading there, and Emily Brown as well. Milton.
But where's the rhinoceros candidate?
He's not on the screen there.
Oh man.
Not on the top 5. He's there. There's Adam Vancouver in the lead as predicted by our panelists tonight. And we're going to go to Wellington Halton Hills next. And the Rhino Party has 14, if you were wondering there, Jeff.
Instead of 14 votes.
Well,
I
there you
don't
have
think
it.
it's 14%.
No, 14.
Gotta clarify.
So we are just, I mean, with the only 10 minutes or so left in the program, I will tell you that just from what we're watching right now, CBC is calling it a Liberal government. It's unfortunate some of our local ridings hasn't officially called, or not all the results are in, but that could be because of mail-in ballots and mail-in ballots actually, or rather. So in these last 10 minutes, I want to ask just each of you, if this is going to be a Liberal minority, which is what is being predicted, was it worth it? Z?
I think it was a miscalculation on Prime Minister Trudeau's part, and I think what's going to happen is that there's an opportunity for Conservatives and NDP to capitalize on it, because given that it's a minority, we'll probably have an election in 2 years. And so this gives them a chance to really sharpen their pencil, sharpen their messaging, their platform, and really hammer this point across. Because I suspect, and that's what I predicted this morning, I think the seat count will roughly be equal at the end of the night than it was before, within 10% or so. So I think it was pretty much a useless exercise, but it did buy Liberal Party a couple of years, I suppose.
Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, whether or not this was an election that needed to be called really rests in the Governor General, Mary May Simon, who approved the request to dissolve Parliament. So whatever the reasons that were presented there have to be available to look at.
Jeff.
Jeff is just chomping at the
I can't wait.
You're being so patient, Jeff.
No, I think it's very true. So we heard some of the in the field reporters talk about what are you hearing at the doors, and this is a very valid thing. They were hearing, why are we calling an election right now? And even if it's to have the same outcome that was already there and buying 2 more years, I think Trudeau has said it's to reinforce the mandate and to reestablish what you want done, Canada. And Erin O'Toole and Conservatives have said, we're calling out for change. If you want change, here's your opportunity. And I think those 2 things are the root of democracy: a strong mandate to move forward, or a strong appetite for change. And that's what's given Canadian voters an election choice.
Okay, Jeff, go.
Well, first of all,
I think we're cutting out.
let's wrap up now. First of all, let's put a number on this. $600 million. How many childcare spaces could we make with $600 million? How many affordable housing opportunities could we have made with $600 million? This is an with great respect, the Governor General does not have the ability to say, sorry, Justin, we're not calling this election. So that is the Prime Minister's call, 100%. I do understand, theoretically, yes, I guess, but 100%. So he called the election. We got to bell the cat here. This was a capital, grade A screw up on Trudeau's part. He's going to come out, as he said, with essentially the same parliament that we had before. And frankly, you know what? If there was a way to do it, I don't know the Liberal Party constitution. You should toss that guy out and find somebody else, because this is a ridiculous election that we had no business being in. Those of us who run businesses are all on pins and needles wondering what's going to happen as to the supports for us, because the pandemic is not yet over. And I want to say it again, $600 million. You know,
well,
like I make the call.
I know. Sorry.
So
I didn't want to hurt my neck to look.
So the Liberals, just to be fair, the Liberals did have 155 seats before all this happened. So they needed really 15 or so. You know, so I guess we can understand why, I suppose, early polling suggested, internal polling, I guess, go for it. But
there's no call. They had lots of time on the mandate left. Nobody was chomping at the bit to have an election. They should have stuck to the guns and governed the country, you know, through the balance of this pandemic. Trudeau could have come out on the, I mean, I don't want to give the man advice, but he could have come out on the other end of this as a hero if he would have maneuvered Canada out of the pandemic without doing this, honestly.
Without going into an election.
Absolutely.
I mean, and we do have the provincial election next year and the municipal election next year. I'm not sure if people will have an appetite to do another federal 2 years from now.
No.
So
let's cancel the municipal.
Yeah,
Well, that's actually pretty a good point, because we have been under emergency order longer than we have not been under emergency order as councillors. So, you know, that is unprecedented for.
Lisa wants to do over.
So we've got about 3 minutes left. I do want to give our viewers a quick look at the numbers, or a minute and a half actually, or rather. Let's take a quick look at the numbers before we say goodbye. Just there's Oakville, North Burlington. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. That was super fast. Time flew when you're having fun, right?
Absolutely.
I hope to have you on again, maybe during the provincial and municipal next year. We'll see, unless of course you're all running the municipal. So I'll have to get a new panelist, right? Let's put a date, pencil it in. Thank you so much again. Once again, we had Zishan Hamid, Lisa Kearns, and Jeff Knoll as our panelists today for Your Vote. We will have more information on tomorrow's newscast. Unfortunately, we don't have final results for each of the riding. So all you have to do, if you want more information, you can always go to our website, yourtv.tv. You can connect with us on social media just by searching Your TV Halton. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on this program today. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.